He is the Republican nominee for the United States House of Representatives in Michigan's Congressional District 15. He is Dr. Rob Steele. Dr. Steele, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me on.
Oh, it's our pleasure to have you. Now, I know you're running against John Dingell, who I noted earlier in the show has held the seat for, I think, 55 years, and his father held it for something like 23 years before that. So you definitely jumped in to what many would consider to be a difficult race, but if there's ever been a year to win a race like that, 2010 is going to be that year. So why don't we just kind of start off by you introducing yourself, a little about your background, and where exactly CD15 is in Michigan.
Yeah, well, I'm a heart doctor and been in practice for just about 25 years, a little under that. Married, 4 kids. My wife's a doctor. Oldest kid is just finished college, finished a 3-month internship with President Ed Fulner at the Heritage Foundation just a couple weeks back. And a couple of other kids in college, one in high school. And decided to run for Congress because just the way crazy spending is going right now. And, you know, when I'm in practice, one of the greatest things that I get to do is see these World War II vets. And it's just amazing to sit here and talk with those guys who at 18 to 20 years went off, you know, across the ocean somewhere, volunteered for service, went off and just did amazing things and made incredible sacrifices, you know, so that you and I could have the opportunity that we have to succeed and prosper today. And I just knew that I couldn't get to be 80 years old and look back and say I didn't stand up and try to protect that opportunity the greatest generation gave me, you know, so that I could pass it on and give it to, you know, my kids and my grandkids. I got 28 nieces and nephews, all smart, bright kids, and I just look around and say all these guys, they deserve the same chance we did. So I had to, you know, stand up and say I'm going to do something.
Well, we applaud you for that. You're not by any chance one of those doctors that went to the Capitol last year on 9/12 and challenged the members of Congress about Obamacare, are you?
No, I was working. But yeah, we do need a lot of changes on the health care plan. It's something I'm real familiar with. And my cardiology practice, I'm one of about 30-plus cardiologists in my group, and we have about 300 employees with multiple offices, and I'm one of the more senior guys. And we have, you know, the doctors run most of it. We have some professional help, of course, but I'm chair of the Finance and Benefits Committee, so I'm real familiar with what goes on, you know, with benefits and health care and insurance and how all that stuff works. And what I can tell you in the short version, without going through 2,800 pages, why the health care bill is just really a difficult thing for the country to face up to in the future. It's going to be bad for patients. It's going to be bad for, you know, the future of the country, the budget, liberty, the whole thing. So it's something that we definitely have to repeal and start over. We need some changes, but what they've done now is really a disaster.
Well, I've seen her last name is just evading me right now. The former Lieutenant Governor of New York. I saw her on Fox News Channel this past week, I think it was, and she had the whole stack, the whole health care bill in front of her. And some of the things that she pointed out were that, you know, we've cut more actually than $500 million, $500 billion from Medicare, much more than they originally said. Over the next 10 years, I think she said something like $4 trillion actually will be taken out of Medicare. I mean, do you agree that as this bill currently stands, that specialists are going to basically leave the profession and that a Medicare patient will be lucky to even find a doctor in the next few years?
Well, I don't think it's so much oriented at specialists as at anybody. The Medicare cuts are quite drastic, and most of the new people that will be covered under the health care bill, they project about 30 million people will be newly covered with insurance. Unfortunately, 16 million of those will be under Medicaid, and Medicaid is a federal mandated program to the states. In many states, including those like Michigan and many other large states like New York and California, their budgets are in pretty tough shape right now, and they can't afford to pay for this Medicaid stuff. And it's typically like most government programs. It's a little like crack. They give it to you free at the beginning, and then a couple years later they take away their support, and the states are left holding the bag. So In terms of the federal mandate and state independence, it's a really bad thing, and you've heard about a couple of governors in different states saying, well, we're not going to participate with that program because we don't want to pay for it down the road. But the problem with Medicare, more specifically, is that the cuts right now in our practice in the state of Michigan, Medicare pays about 38 cents on the dollar, and Medicaid pays approximately 16 to 18 cents on the dollar. And so there are already many doctors who don't see new Medicare patients because it doesn't really cover costs. And so over the next 10 years, there's projected to be about another 30% decrease in payment to Medicare. And so, of course, the scarcity, well, that's how they do it. They create scarcity by having no providers available to see these patients. And, of course, with Medicaid right now, that's already heavily rationed by the government because they pay so little. There's no doctors that see those patients hardly.
Right. And for those that do, they have to pass on the costs to the patients that have private insurance. So it's just a mess all around. Do you think that health insurance in general is a good thing? Do you think that, how do I put this, that health insurance makes Americans bad consumers of medical care because we don't worry about what the cost is? If you go into the example I always see people using is your car. You go in to get your car serviced, preventative maintenance especially, you find out what the cost of an oil change is going to be, and if you can get it for a few dollars cheaper down the road, you go and get it a few dollars cheaper down the road. Most of us go into a doctor's office, we never ask what anything costs other than what the copay is.
Well, you've hit on a really critical thing there. Like I mentioned, I have been real involved in the health care benefit program for our practice, and our practice and employees of approximately 300 people, our health care costs have actually gone down just a fraction from 2005 to 2010. And we did that using high deductible policies, flexible spending accounts, health savings accounts, or health reimbursement accounts. And we have wellness programs for our employees, and we give them rewards for doing, healthy things. And it's interesting. Healthcare premiums drop so much, we're able to pay the deductible for our employees, most of it. And so our employees, even with this high deductible plan, their maximum expense is far less than our competitors over at the University of Michigan with, gold-plated employee health benefits. And part of it, and we've seen it here in Michigan, where high deductible plans have become more common recently with the bad economy, that people are much better consumers. And one of the things that people don't talk about too much as regards health care is that the average consumer of health care pays approximately 13 cents on the dollar of health care costs consumed. And so it's kind of like if you I don't know what you like to do, but here in Michigan a lot of people like to fish and hunt or do whatever. And so if we gave somebody a card to go to, a charge card to go to Cabela's or Lowe's or Home Depot, and we said, you go buy whatever you want and you only have to pay 13 cents on every dollar you spend, you're probably going to spend a little bit more than if you were paying the whole dollar. And that's exactly what's going on right now today. It's at 13 cents. But with the new health care plan, that 13 cents is going to drop even more, well under 10 cents on the dollar for the average consumer. And so, of course, costs will continue to rise quite dramatically.
Right, and Rob, hi, this is Daria. As the daughter of a surgeon, when you were talking about, what Medicare actually pays, I can relate to that. I used to work in his office when I was in high school and in college, and I can relate to this all too well. And the fight for tort reform, back in the 80s, and I grew up in Pennsylvania, and it was just, specialists back then were leaving the state in droves, especially OBGYNs, because they just couldn't cope with the the high cost of malpractice insurance and what was happening. And my own father, he retired years before he really, he could still be practicing today, but it got to the point where, the malpractice was close to $100,000 a year, and it just got to be unaffordable. So, I guess, my question, if we can stay on the healthcare issue just for a minute, do you support tort reform and interstate competition? And just one other comment, sorry, before you answer that. I also think you touched on a really important point in terms of personal responsibility, which is something that seems to be lacking in our culture these days, where, with health savings accounts, and things like that, people take more responsibility for their own health and taking part in wellness programs. So I definitely agree with you on that. But, how do you feel about tort reform and interstate competition? And if elected, what are some of the things you'll try to do to stop this train wreck called Obamacare?
Well, the first thing I would say is regards tort reform. There is no such thing as health care reform without tort reform. That's absolutely number one, our number one issue. Thomson Reuters is actually located right here in Ann Arbor. The Thomson Healthcare Division, it's a big consulting firm and healthcare informatics type place. They did a white paper last fall, and they were looking at healthcare costs in the United States, and they said they think there's almost $1 trillion wasted. They agree there's huge waste. But the single greatest part of that waste, something like 38%, they felt was related to excess testing due to defensive medicine and malpractice. And so tort reform is critical. And I might say here in Michigan, we had tort reform in the mid-1990s, and our health care our medical malpractice premiums dropped extremely dramatically here and stabilized things quite nicely. And in fact, there are many other states like Oklahoma and Texas that have also had tort reform. And the key thing, you really mentioned it, not only does it stabilize the premium, but it makes the care available. I mean, it allows for there to be people who will actually practice those certain high-risk specialties that otherwise are unavailable. And that's one of the things that's absolutely one of the most disingenuous things in the health care bill. They had 2,800 pages of nobody reading it. And then they said, well, we can't address tort reform because we can't do everything all at once. And so what they did is they put in there and said, well, we're going to put in some money for some demonstration projects. And, of course, the Founding Fathers, they put together this form of government which had the states as laboratories. And there are many, many, many states, I didn't name them all, that have had tort reform experiments, and it's shown a dramatic stabilization of malpractice premiums and an increase in supply of physicians, particularly in high-risk specialties in the emergency room. And so this whole idea of there being no tort reform was strictly, about the trial attorneys, which, of course, is a huge supporter of the current Democrat Party. So that's for sure number one. As regards, what I would do when I get in there, I mean, I'm obviously in favor of repealing the whole thing and starting over. Whether it can be repealed or not, even if it's passed, I would expect the president to veto it. But I don't, I think they should still have that vote. I think the House and Senate, particularly if it's in control of the Republicans, they should absolutely try to pass those bills and make the president veto it. I think the longer it goes, the more people discover things that are in there that pop up every week that are crazy. And geez, we could talk about this one topic for 2 hours. It's a real disaster.
Absolutely. And just one other quick thing too. I mean, and the moral implications too of these. Sarah Palin called them death panels, and some people took offense to that, but she was absolutely right. I mean, when you have a group of bureaucrats getting in between you as a doctor and your patients and determining whether their life is worth saving or, whether their health is worth that operation that they need based on their age or the fact that they're handicapped or some other, arbitrary reason is downright evil.
Yeah, well, the unelected bureaucracy is clearly an issue here, and that's one of the things that I feel that most people are very worried about with government. I mean, I'm running my campaign is really based on what I consider to be very nonpartisan issues. I'm running on controlling spending, giving our kids and grandkids the same chance we had. Having some accountability. Let's have them read the bill first. How about that for starters? Just like if somebody came to my office, they would expect me to look at their chart. They're legislators. That's their job. They are supposed to be passing legislation. And so how can you possibly do that and claim competence without reading the bill? And the other thing, of course, is following the same laws that you make everybody else follow. For example, the accounting laws is one of the biggest places where the government doesn't have to follow the same rules as private businesses, and that's what's led to some of these disasters with the massive unfunded liabilities and keeping costs off the books like Fannie and Freddie and all these other huge situations. Then the third thing is transparency, and that's, let's have a bill that's one topic, unchanged for a week before anybody gets to vote on it. None of this conference stuff, vote at midnight on Christmas Eve. Let everybody know what's in the bill. Have people have a chance to study it and see what's in it and vote on it. And then on each one of those bills, we'll have a single cover sheet. And that single cover sheet will show where the money's coming from that might be spent in that bill and then where that money's going to be spent. And I think if we do these things, if we have accountability and transparency, I think all these issues that we battle over as people on each side of the partisan divide and who have different views of the government, I think these problems will be solved very quickly once the people themselves actually have a better chance, to make their feelings known and hold the representatives' feet to the fire instead of bowing 2,800 page where each lobbyist as special interest gets their own line in the tax code and in these massive bills.
That's absolutely right. Well, let's move on to another topic. Like you said, we could talk about this for 2 hours if we had 2 hours. Another big issue where the American people have really made their desires known, and where the administration seems to be going in the opposite direction, is illegal immigration. So I guess my question for you would be, first off, where do you stand on Arizona's SB 1070, and what solutions do you have for the illegal immigration problem in terms of both enforcement of the border and internal enforcement for those that are here already illegally?
Well, I think the critical key thing before you do anything else is you absolutely have to secure the border. I mean, I'm not an attorney, I'm a physician, so I can't comment on the legalities of the bill in Arizona. But I think the clear principle that has to be laid down for everyone to understand is that the borders have to be secure before you do anything else. Nothing can be solved where the borders are still leaky. When a patient comes in and they're bleeding to death, the first thing you got to do is stop the bleeding. You don't go check their house for chemicals first. You stop the bleeding, and so we have to stop these uncontrolled borders. And it's real simple. I live in Ann Arbor, and it's a great community. A lot of really bright people who are very compassionate and high-minded about many of these things. And it's a little more liberal university town, and but it's real simple when you have this discussion. I mean, I just simply say, do you lock your doors, or do you not lock your doors? And if you do lock your doors, why do you do that? And if you came home one day after work and you found someone in your house that didn't belong there, would they get to stay, or would you get to decide? And so, we just have to do the borders first, figure out all the rest of the stuff later. And then at the high end of the immigration thing, I mean, it's a paradox, of course. Then the people the kind of people that built the United States in the sense of legal immigration, because, of course, the success of the United States has depended largely on successful assimilation of waves of immigrants. It's what propelled us to the top of the economic pile as you reach the late 1800s and early 1900s. And so, we have some very, very bright people who want to come here and stay, and we don't let them. So instead what happens is they come here, they go to the university, we train them up in the very latest stuff, because that's one place where the United States dominates is in higher education, and we send them home to take that intellectual power with them rather than encouraging them to stay here and use it here in the United States. And so there's a lot of paradox in our whole thing, where we keep out the people that we want to keep in, and then we just let other people come in without keeping track. And of course, Michigan is actually one of the most highly crossed borders, in the country with Canada. Absolutely, it was the only place open shortly after 9/11. One of our bridges to Canada. It was the only controlled border that was allowing people to cross. So, we deal with that as well, and have a large border with Canada, and it's something that definitely we have to get control of. Got to control the borders first.
Okay, but in terms of the people that are here already, one of the big controversies is, do you give a path to citizenship, as they like to call it, to people that have already broken into our country, have already jumped the line, or do you say no to that? I mean, they're going to have a vote on that more than likely this week in the Senate. Harry Reid is trying to attach the DREAM Act to the Defense Appropriations Bill to make it difficult for Republicans to vote against it. How do you feel about that?
Well, you hit two things there. One, referencing back to one of my main platforms is you have one bill, one topic. Because here they're trying to, attach one thing that's completely unrelated to another so that they can, play politics with decisions and problems that need to be solved. But for people who are here illegally now, they should not have any access to citizenship. You cannot gain access to citizenship by breaking the law. Now, whether they end up with some way that they can be documented to be here and allowed to stay, that may be a possibility. But citizenship, no. How can you say we're going to grant citizenship to people who started their path to citizenship by breaking the law? That's a non-starter.
I agree. Just as a very quick follow-up to that, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the DREAM Act, but there's actually two aspects to it. One thing is if you're the child of an illegal immigrant in this country and you go to college for 2 years, you'd have a path to citizenship. And then the other option would be if you serve in the United States military. Now, for me personally, the college part I don't buy. That's almost rewarding the person twice for getting here illegally, and it's just another magnet to draw illegals here to have children. But in terms of the military part, I can almost have some sympathy for that, because there you've had somebody who's put their life on the line and given service to this country, and then you're saying, well, then you've earned your path to citizenship that way. You have any opinion about that?
Well, I would kind of lean toward your view. I would have to read the details of the bill because, of course, that's one of the things I said. You need to read the bill and know what's in it before you commit to a yes. But the idea of, in a general sense of saying, would a military situation be one that might be more likely than the other? Yes, I would give that consideration because, of course, there are many non-citizens that fight valiantly in our armed forces because they want access to the opportunity and the freedom and the American dream that they, came here for. They left where they were to try to do that. And when they served in the armed forces, that's not many better ways than saying I'm committed. And that.
Right. And Rob, one issue, and it kind of ties in with what we were just talking about, because if we're not a free, secure nation, no one, whether you're a legal citizen or an American your entire life, is going to be able to pursue their dreams and freedom if we don't do something about global jihad and the threat of terrorism. And that was one of the questions that someone had in our chat room. They wanted to know your position on that, and how you where you stand on that issue in terms of keeping the United States safe and continuing this ongoing offensive against radical Islamic terror.
Well, it's clearly an issue, and it's one where in the Middle East, clearly Israel is trying to anchor democracy on one end. Obviously, the strategy was to get Iraq to be a second democracy, and I think those two prongs are very important to trying to stabilize that region. Nukes into Iran as regards terrorism is just the biggest disaster you could possibly have. Massive, the most gruesome weapons in the hand of the most unstable people and regimes who say they want to use them offensively is clearly our greatest and gravest threat to the future of civilization, really, in the way that we know of it. And so I think that's probably one of the key areas that we need to really focus on. I mean, here in my area, we have a large Muslim population in the Dearborn area, part of which is in my district, and it's interesting because it's a real mix of people in that region. There's a lot of Muslims, there's a lot of Arabs who aren't Muslim that are Christian, Chaldeans, and so, we're real used to this idea of, the melting pot sort of situation right here in our district.
Well, I've heard it referred to as Dearbornistan in many of the blogs that I've read, and so I think that while we are a tolerant country and we're welcoming of everyone, I think that 9/11 proves that we can't just fall asleep again and not and build walls between intelligence agencies like we had during the 90s after the 93 World Trade Center bombing. Because this is such an unprecedented type of a war that we're fighting. We're in many ways it's a war. It's an intelligence war, as much as it's going out there and destroying the enemy type of a war. So it's a concern, and it does tie in with with what we were talking about with the borders, because those borders are are going to be exploited if we're not on the offensive and making sure that people who want to harm us aren't taking advantage of our lack of political will to do the right thing and secure the borders first, and then talk about the rest of the immigration issue after.
Yes, absolutely. It's a huge issue. It's the huge issue, moving forward. I mean, right now we have a lot of economic issues, and we have a lot of issues where people feel like the government is not responsive. And I think that's why I say kind of fixing the accountability and transparency problem, I think will make it easier to deal with all these issues, whether an economic issue, whether it's a security issue, military issue, or, other civil society, freedom, opportunity, prosperity issue. But the people, my view of what's going on out there as I'm out in the community and campaigning is that all the independents that are rushing into the process right now, count me one. I've never been involved in partisan politics one way or the other. I went to my first county convention approximately a month ago. My view of it is that these are people who mainly want the spending stopped and they want accountability. These are people who feel like they have accountability everywhere in their life. If they have a boss, they're accountable to their boss. If they own a business, they're accountable to their customer. And I think, what I hear is people just feel like the government feels like they have no accountability and that the people are there to serve the government instead of the government to serve the people. And I think that's really what's driving a lot of these independents and where I feel the real focus of my campaign is and kind of addressing that. Because the people are smart in the United States and they know what they want and they understand basic things that they consider to be American, quote. And part of that has to do with liberty and opportunity and the pursuit. And everybody that I speak with feels those are kind of some of the key things that we have to address.
I think we can agree on that. We have about 4 minutes left, so let me just kind of give you basically two subjects to talk about quickly. Obviously, the economy is a big thing, and a couple of things that tie into that are government spending and energy. So I guess my questions to you will be, in terms of where would you cut government spending, or are there any particular even departments in the government that you would want to get rid of? And in terms of energy, what's your stance on oil drilling offshore, onshore, and just generally your energy thinking?
Well, just as regards spending, the way to fix our budget problem, our revenue problem, is clearly not through the tax code, but through growing the economy. And that may mean using the tax code in the sense that we don't increase taxes and punish the people who are pulling the wagon. But the key part here in spending is spending has exploded to a degree that is absolutely unprecedented in just the last 2 years. And, of course, one of the reasons I'm running for the House of Representatives and Congress is because that's where the spending takes place. I mean, I don't want to bother with people who are blaming Bush or blaming Obama or Clinton had a deficit or didn't and Reagan had a deficit and this and that. It's the House of Representatives that spends the money. The President can cut spending, but he can't increase it. And it's the House of Representatives, it's Congress that controls the purse strings, and that's where we have to focus our attention. And so if we, spending exploded in 2006 when there was a change in the Speaker of the House, from John Boehner to Nancy Pelosi. And the deficits went from approximately 150 to 200 billion at that time to 440 billion by the end of 2 years, and then obviously exploded to 4 times that over the last 2 years. And so simply cutting spending back to the levels of 2007, 8 even, as bad as that was at record times, we will be able to grow our way out of that by allowing people to grow the economy. And I would just say about taxes and that sort of thing, there's $900 billion in capital being sat on by corporations and businesses, and they're doing that because they don't know what's going to happen. And they talk about a $50 billion stimulus plan, and that's a joke. There's $900 billion there sitting ready to be spent and invested in their own business to generate profits, hire people, build businesses, and let people make the house payment. So the key thing is we got to keep tax rates stable where they are right now. We have to cut all the crazy unelected bureaucracy and red tape and let it stop these crazy regulations that are being proposed, but nobody knows what they're going to be, and let these people invest that money in their business and help their communities. As regards energy, I'm definitely all of the above. I think nuclear power is one of the key things that we need to do. We need to have a design that's a pre-approved, standardized design with clear-cut environmental impact stuff that's done all ahead of time. Here in Detroit, we just had a nukes plant proposed last year, and that's going to take 6 years for approval of the plant, not to build it, 6 years before they will be able to start building this thing. Here in southeast Michigan, the local trades, skilled trades, AFL-CIO, all these guys, steam fitters, pipe fitters, steel workers, all these people are sitting around on their hands with no jobs. And we can help fix that by building some highly efficient, environmentally friendly nuke plants that will help power the economy into the future. As regards to drilling, places like Santa Monica, they have more oil leak up out of the water, out of the beach, onto the beach, out of the ocean floor every year than was spilled in Exxon Valdez. And the disaster in the Gulf was a disaster, and huge mistakes were made there, which need to be studied carefully and rectified, and the appropriate people punished and action taken. But yeah, so we're sitting on the largest reserve of energy of any country in the world, and there's no reason why we should be keeping ourselves from using it and sending our money off to these dictators and tyrants who are trying to punish us in one way or another.
All right. Well, we're going to have to end it right there, except to give you an opportunity to just kind of, once again, tell people who you are and what your website is so they can learn more about you and contribute to your campaign if they're so inclined.
Absolutely. You can contribute directly at ditchdingle.com. My regular website is www.robsteele, S-T-E-E-L-E, 4FORCongress.com. You can go to either of those sites and get some information. We have a very active Facebook fan page. I would encourage all your listeners to go to the fan page and go ahead and become fans there. That's updated on a very, very regular basis, and that's also titled Rob Steele for Congress.
Excellent. Well, we thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us, and we wish you luck in November.